Hopefully you are familiar with Lido's Shuffle. If you are not, you might want to stop, check it out, because it provides a great foundation for what we're going to be addressing with respect to the Babylon Shuffle. So let's look at this Babylonian Empire. We're going to look at the relationship again between Rome and Babylon and Set. One of the things to keep in mind with respect to Babylon is a big shuffle, just like Rome is a big shuffle. Austria is a big shuffle. What do we mean by shuffle? Shuffle sometimes means to deal dishonestly. And so that's what we have with Babylon, Rome, Austria. It means to mingle, to mix up, to rearrange, and sometimes it involves a bit of subterfuge. And so that's what we are looking at with Babylon. What's also missing from many of the discussions about Babylon is the realization that the Babylonian Empire is really a theocracy. This is a religious empire. And if you think about what happens with monarchs, there's really no such thing as a monarch without a priest that installs the monarch. And so what we think are monarchies are really theocracies. And this is from Rome on down to some of the smaller kingdoms that you might be able to think of. And so there's always this priest class that's calling the shots. And Babylon is no different. Rome is no different. Egypt was no different. And so they are all pretty much the same in terms of this theocratic paradigm. And we often miss it because we are under the guise of a belief that the political systems that we have, the legal systems that we have, we believe that they are secular for the most part. They are not secular. And that's why it's very difficult to have a complete conversation about what might be going on in a political arena. It's because people refuse to look at the situation holistically and admit that much of the political game involves this spiritual umbrella. And so it's all under, again, this theocracy. And with respect to Babylon, this is a significant theocracy, just like Rome has been a significant theocracy. They are all the same. And what we're going to be looking at is the God of Babylon, of this empire, the God of Rome. And as you know, it's Set yet again. It's very interesting because Set purportedly is coming out of Egypt, but there's some indication that Set is not simply coming out of Egypt. And Set seems very ubiquitous, if you will. And so Set's just everywhere. So we're going to look at this dynamic of the Babylon shuffle so that you can see that Babylon is synonymous with Set. And so not only do you have this, it's a relationship with Set, but it actually is Set. And we're going to see how that all comes about. Now, the world is in quite a situation dealing with Babylon or dealing with Set, and the world has been in quite a situation for a while. One of the things to consider with respect to the Babylon shuffle and this Babylonian Empire and the Holy Roman Empire and this whole idea of an empire with no boundaries. One thing to keep in mind, and this goes back to Lido Shuffle, is that we are all dealing with a situation sort of like a card game. And in this card game, the deck is stacked. We were born into the stacked deck. Not only is the deck stacked, but the stacker, the entity dealing the cards, has a royal flush. Not only does the entity have a royal flush, the entity is trump tight, meaning that whatever the trump card happens to be, we'll just use a spade for now. That'll work. The entity has 13 cards in the entity's hand. However, all 13 cards are spades. And so the deck has been dealt in such a way that it's really impossible to win against the house, because the house has stacked the deck and has selected the 13 cards. The deck is stacked, the cards are marked, so there's all sorts of stuff going on with this particular stacked deck. And so the dealer knows what the dealer has in the dealer's hand, those 13 cards in one suit. And because the cards are marked, the dealer knows what's in the hands of the other people playing. But it doesn't really matter because, again, the dealer has a royal flush and the dealer is trump tight with this stacked deck. This is Babylon. This is Rome. This is Austria. This is not about the general people and the general population of these places. Again, this is about a religious dynamic. This is about a theocracy. So a theocratic rule, religious rule. Some people might think of it as God rule. And when we think about, many of these individuals have simply created a God in their image, then you do have this sort of God, small g, rule going on. The other thing that goes along with this is the dark tetrad. And so Babylon, Rome, these entities are dark tetrad entities in terms of the rulership, in terms of the priest class. This is a dark tetrad class of entities, not just a dark triad, but a dark tetrad. And so, of course, there are narcissistic underpinnings, but not just narcissistic underpinnings, but psychopathic underpinnings. And not only psychopathy, but psychopathy mixed in with some other dynamics. And so hopefully you'll take a little bit of time and get some information about what's up with the dark tetrad. It'll help you to better understand what we are dealing with, what humanity has been dealing with, what we continue to deal with that is under the guise of something else. But that's what we are dealing with. We're dealing with this dark tetrad. So that's Rome, that's Babylon, that's Austria, that's Set, all of it, dark tetrad. The Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Empire, Babylon, they have an interesting little mascot, and it's a black eagle. Not only is it a black eagle, it's a very specific black eagle. And this black eagle has two heads. However, the two heads are under yet another unified crown. And so you've got two crowns, and then you have the unification of the crowns. And it has a very interesting body. We can get into that at some other time. But inside of the body, you see all of these sovereign entities inside of the body of this particular mascot. And so with Rome and Babylon, there really is this serious game of thrones going on. And so, well, of course, we're talking about an empire. And so you've got entities that are under the empire umbrella. Now, it's very interesting with this mascot because the emperor who adopted or utilized this mascot had several titles, under his belt. He was the Holy Roman Emperor. We'll just start there. He had another crown. So just think about all of these crowns. So you've got this one entity that actually has all of these crowns. And so the person is the Holy Roman Emperor. The person is the King of the Romans. The person was the King of Germany. The person was the King of Sicily. The person was the King of Italy. And then the ultimate, the Holy Roman Emperor was also the King of Jerusalem. Okay, so again, we have quite a game of thrones going on here. And all of this is the Holy Roman Empire. All of this is Austria. All of this is the Babylonian Empire. And there are some interesting notations related to that Holy Roman Emperor. I believe his name was Frederick II. And he was seen as, interestingly, by the Pope at that time, as the precursor to the Antichrist. So he had a very interesting identity. But the important part here is that this particular entity had all of these crowns. And so this starts to give you an idea of how complex this Holy Roman Empire happened to be, how far-reaching it was. And ultimately, it went beyond all of this, of course. And so while theoretically you have Set or Seth over these empires, there are real people who play major parts in making the empires run smoothly, in expanding the empires. And so you have individuals that take on conquering roles, invasive roles, because remember, Seth or Set is the deity of foreign lands. And we can get into that also. And so there's this dynamic of this deity is an invasive deity. And those that worship this deity or see themselves as disciples of this deity, they are also into the invasive paradigm. They are into the conquering paradigm. Just like Set, they do not have good boundaries. They do not respect boundaries. They don't know what boundaries are. And so that's what we are dealing with when you see these entities throughout history and you think about the different ways in which they exhibited no respect for boundaries, no sense of when they begin and another person ends, just no sense of it whatsoever. And again, that also is a quality of narcissism. It is definitely a quality of psychopathy. Anytime people are running around the earth taking stuff that does not belong to them and trying to get rid of the people who originally owned it just so that they can have it. These are not happy, healthy, well-adjusted people. I don't care how you twist that story. As we've discussed before, Set is such an interesting, ubiquitous, dynamic construct. What's interesting is that even though you have all of these understandings of Set or Seth, there's a foundational dynamic related to Seth, and it relates to the number 6. It's very interesting. And so Set really is 6. That's his name, 6. Um, and what's also noteworthy is when you see things coded for 6. And so if you look in Strong's Concordance, you see a very interesting notation for Hebrew 6, abad. And it's actually sort of out of place because something else comes before it, but in terms of etymology, this should have come before that. But conveniently, we have this abad, and it's basically Set. It indicates to perish, to destroy, to lose, to be lost. Okay, to lose oneself. And how interesting we see that this example in scripture of this abad and destroy is in relation to Egypt. Now, for this deconstruction, it's important for you to keep in mind, even though we are talking about Set, we are talking about Babylon, we are talking about Rome, we are talking about Austria simultaneously. And so saying Set is the same thing as saying Babylon. It's the same thing as saying Rome. It's the same thing as saying the priest class. Okay, so the other thing we have here with respect to this 6 showing up in the Hebrew in Strong's Concordance, we have annihilate, corrupt, destroy, destruction, makes to perish, obliterate, utterly destroy, ruin, waste. It goes on and on and on with this same theme. And of course, this goes right along with the understanding of Set. Now, of course, when people are worshiping Set and they are identifying with Set, they don't see Set in this way. Set's good. And even if Set's doing these things according to them, it's because Set needed to do these things. And of course, it's them generally doing these things under the authority of Set. Let them tell it. Okay, so we have all of these interesting dynamics related to this 6 in Strong's Concordance, and it just interestingly correlates with the nature of Set. And by that, I am saying the nature of the people who revere Set. This is essentially them standing behind Set and using Set as the excuse for what they do or have done or think about doing. Some people like to say things like, they wrestle not against flesh and blood. Okay. I offer to you that flesh and blood serve as the embodiment of those spirits that you think you're wrestling against, those principalities and powers of the air. So now back to Set again. We see here in Britannica that Seth is an Egyptian deity. However, at some point in time, Set or Seth came to be identified as the god of the Eastern invaders. Okay? So when we think about the Eastern invaders, we're talking about the Osterreich. the Oostenrijk, the Oostenrijk, the Oostenrijk, Austria, the eastern ones. Okay, and so they are the entities, and we're talking about, again, this gigantic empire that encompasses, multiple continents. And so that's what Set came to be associated with. And as a matter of fact, Set or Seth is the patron deity of the kings of the pharaohs. This means that Set or Seth is a protective deity for those entities. And so this isn't seen as a bad deity for them. This is a deity that they see as almighty. This is their most high God, their most high deity. It's Set, and Set is for them, just as they are for Set. And just in case you missed it, you can see it very clearly here. And so again, it's referring to the East, and we went through all of the things that are meant by East. So this could be the Levant invaders, the Austria invaders, the Timur invaders, the Mizrahi invaders, the Dogu, Dog Star invaders, and the list goes on and on and on. And so, in other words, Seth is their deity, their God. Now, as the story goes, Eve had a baby. This was her third baby, and his name was Seth. Or shall we say, she named him Seth or Set. It's interesting that this was the best name that she could come up with. But the name was given because, according to the narrative, Set or Seth was to serve as a substitute or a replacement for the loss of Abel. And so right there, you have a paradigm wherein someone is not really in their legitimate place, but they are serving as a replacement. And so that's one of the identities of Set. Set is a usurper. Set, of course, is a trickster. But according to this narrative, Set is simply serving as a replacement. And so Eve's wish has been granted, and she has this new son, Set or Seth. Now, of course, this all makes sense when you think about Eve's name and that Hava, Hova, and everything that goes along with that. So, of course, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and it makes sense when you look at the totality of Set that Set would be coming from a Hova or Hava. So Set also means not just put and place, but tumult. Tumult. Set means so many things. It's very interesting that anyone would want to be associated with Seth upon knowing fully all of these things that relate to Set. And so in addition to, of course, tumult, we have Set is essentially the number 6. Even though this is spelled Sheth, it's still Set or Seth or Sheath. There are many ways to say Set, apparently. And so this is coming from, in the Hebrew, this sha'ah, this tumult, this Seth. And so Seth is understood as tumult. And this is going to lead us to Babylon. This is the road to Babylon right here. And here you see the road to Babylon. So this is what Set or Seth is rooted in, this Sha'ah. And so it starts off with the definition is to gaze, regard, pay attention, look. Of course, according to the narrative about Seth or Set, Set would want all of those things to take place. However, when you look at the meaning of this particular construct, you see that there's something else going on here. And there's the suggestion that this means to rush and to desolate. And so we just finished looking at number 6, Hebrew, Strong's Concordance, abad, and we saw that it was desolate, to desolate, to destroy. And so here we are with Set's little name, and this is what this name, this word, is rooted in. And in this instance, it's a verb. And here you can see when it's used in scripture that it is talking about land being desolate, or the land and the people. This is in the book of Isaiah. The land and the people being desolate. The land and the people, the cities being devastated. Now, Seth or Set is aptly named. Seth is the right name for this deity. And when you look at the sons of Seth in scripture, then they are also aptly named. The scripture serves as an indictment, by the way. And so there are many things in scripture and many things that people overlook, but that is a primary function of much of the Old Testament. It's an indictment. And so what we see here with Seth or Sheth or Set is that Set's name, the meaning of this Sha'ah, goes right along with what type of deity Set is. Set is a storm god. Interestingly, Yahweh, Hava, is also a storm deity. And so this word, though, is translating as storm, devastation, desert, to be deserted. That's also interesting because Seth is the god of storms, god of destruction, chaos, and the desert. And so it goes on to indicate that this word is about this idea of something being ruined, to be ruined into a desolation. Now, what does this have to do with Babylon? Okay, so we go back to this original meaning that we saw with this tumult. So Seth meaning tumult. What is tumult all about? When you look at the construct of tumult, you see Babylon embedded in tumult. The synonyms of tumult include commotion, ruckus, pandemonium, bedlam, babel. So another way of saying Seth is tumult. Another way of saying tumult is Babel. And here you have additional understandings of the character of Set, the deity Set. We see disorder and chaos and lawlessness. All of this is Set. What's interesting is there are some individuals that believe in this dynamic of having order that comes from chaos. It's a very interesting paradigm. But what they are essentially saying is order from Seth. So Seth or Set is the foundation. And there's also a belief that Set or Seth is the foundation of everything that has been created. Because Seth is another word for chaos. And when you look at the beginning of Genesis, you see this assertion that in the beginning there was chaos. So, by extension, in the beginning there was Seth. Set has been here since day one, according to that understanding. And so Set is chaos. Rome is chaos. Babylon is chaos. Austria is chaos. Österreich, chaos. Levant, chaos. Mizrachi, chaos. Because all of these are converging together. And so when you do that sort of reverse engineering, you see all of the moving parts. And so we also see here this breakdown of chaos, which is a part of the translation of tumult or Seth. And again, we see chaos, madness. That goes along with that megalomaniac component to the dark tetrad, by the way. And so we again see chaos. We see havoc. Seth is havoc. Babylon is havoc. Rome is havoc. And then again, we see Babel. And what do we see with Babel? We see a number of things with Babel. What is Babel all about? And yes, this is the root of Babylon. If you're familiar with the narrative, one of the things that happened in relation to Babel is that the languages were confounded. And so originally everyone was speaking the same language. And because there were some dynamics of megalomania going on, the voices of the people, the languages became confused. They became diverse. And so Babel is another way of saying Babel with the BBLE. Okay. Also Babylon means tumult, commotion, chaos, pandemonium, bedlam, and confusion. And so Seth is the foundation of Babylon. And here we see Babel at 895 in Strong's, meaning Babylonia, meaning the Babylonian Empire. And in the Akkadian, it is supposed to break down to gate of God. Okay, so when you look at this, you can see when it's saying Babel that it might be very easy to get gate of God out of this. And we've looked at the gate of God dynamic before. But Babylon or Babel is Seth. It's another way of saying Seth. And because Babylon and Rome are one and the same, it's essentially saying the same thing. And when you think about the cosmopolitan nature of the Holy Roman Empire, all of that conquest that's going on, all of that invasion that was going on, that is going on, when you look at that, you can see how all of this comes together in a way that is related to Babel, confusion, chaos, and disorder, because you have all of these moving parts that are not necessarily in sync with each other. You have all of these people with all of these languages who are pulled into this one big empire, but they cannot be on one accord because they can't even speak the same languages in order to effectively communicate with each other. That works out fine when you have an empire that is founded upon Set or Seth. And by the way, that's of course what Set means also. It means foundation, to set, to put, to place, to arrange, which is interesting because of course the name also means chaos and disorder. And here we see at 894 essentially the same thing. So we see Babel means confuse or to mix. And we've looked at some other constructs before that also translate as to mix. And Arab is one of those constructs. And of course, you have people identifying with that particular construct, that demographic identifier. And so you also see that this Babel is coming from the Hebrew root of Balal. And here you see the assertion that this Babylon that's in the Hebrew, this Babal in the Hebrew, that this is the same Babylon that's in the New Testament that is referenced in the very interesting book of Revelation. And so in this way, we see Set apparently in the beginning, and then we see Set 66 books down the line in the end in the book of Revelation. Okay, so we also see here that yet again, Babel is the Babylonian Empire. And finally, when looking at this passage related to Moab, we see that Moab is specifically identified with Set. So much so that Moab is related to or understood as the sons of Set specifically. In other words, the sons of tumult. And you can see when you look at the deconstruction under 8351 over on the left-hand side, you can see Set up top, and then you see the actual word that's used, which is tumult. Now, there may be instances where you see the sons of Sheath or Set, but another way of wording that, of course, as we know, is tumult. And so Moab is understood as growing out of Set. Moab is understood as being the sons of chaos, the sons of disorder, the sons of destruction, the sons of desolation, and on and on and on. And here you can see more clearly, and this is in the book of Numbers 24:17, and it indicates that the children of Sheath or Set or tumult shall be destroyed. And they are again identified as Moab. What's interesting, however, is that with respect to the narrative, all of the people on the earth again are identified as the sons and daughters of Seth. This is clearly a game that is being played. And many people innocently don't know that that's what's going on. But if people fully understood the name Set or Seth and everything that is related to that, most people would not willingly want to be identified as the son or daughter of Seth, the son or daughter of tumult, chaos, disorder, and some of those other things that we've talked about relating to Seth and this Seth or Set identity. And so Babylon, when we really look at Babylon, when we look at Rome, part of the mystery is that Babylon's not simply a place. Babylon is a people. Babylon is a disposition. Babylon is a spirit. Babylon is a way of operating. And it's all going back to Set or Seth, but it is also the same as Rome. It is the same as Austria. And so Babylon is something that can be taken on the road. The show can go on the road, just like indicated in Leto's shuffle. Now, I'm not sure if you are familiar with card games. If you are not familiar with card games, or if you are familiar with card games, there's a part of the card game wherein the dealer shuffles the deck. They mix the deck up. They create chaos in the deck, basically. So they mix it up. They mingle it. So all of the cards are all mixed together. And they are also going to be the one who's going to be passing out the cards that everyone will receive. That's sort of like what has happened with humanity. We were sort of born into a shuffled deck. And again, the shuffled deck, is stacked. And some people don't ever question the dealer. They don't ever question the deal. They don't question how the deck is stacked. They simply play the game. The other thing that people generally don't do is do the one thing that you do get to do when playing a card game. When the dealer shuffles the deck, one individual gets to do something very specific. And perhaps it's something to keep in mind when thinking about Babylon and Rome and Set. The one thing that you get to do in the card game is you get to cut the deck.